Up next, we have the 12 slides you need in your independent film investment deck. I had this as a video on the channel as soon as I launched my YouTube channel, but there was a weird encoding error which made that video basically unwatchable. So I figured I might as well re-record that at the same time as I record the rest of the documents video, which you may or may not be watching. I'll link to that either individual video or the full video in the description. But before we talk about the 12 slides you actually need here, it's important to talk a little bit about why this structure is so important. And a lot of it comes down to the same reason that screenplay format is so particular. When people are reading it, they need to understand that you know what you're doing. They need to be able to have their eye glance down it and just get an idea of what you're going for pretty much immediately without too many second thoughts. If you don't follow this format, there's a good chance your project will end up on the reject pile straight off. Same as a script would. Because if you don't follow this format, most investors will just assume you don't know what you're doing and they don't have the time to teach you. Many of these investors get just an ungodly amount of decks sent to them every single week. One investor I talked to gets more than 200 a week. So they look for any reason to say no. Don't be that reason. Don't give them the reason. So in addition to these 12 slides, there is one important thing. You're not supposed to put tons of text on this. Really, at most, you want 5 bullet points with no more than 2 lines of text per bullet point and 36-point font. You have to be very concise and convey what you're going for in as few words and as few characters as possible. It's tricky, but it can be done. So let's get into the 12 slides you need. Also, by the way, there is a free template for this in both PowerPoint and Keynote in the resource section, which I've linked down below. So the 12 slides you need in your independent film investment deck. Slide 0 is project name and artwork. This is just your key art, and your project name may be something like a film from production company name LLC, or an investment opportunity from production company name LLC. Yes, you need to be an LLC. I'm not a lawyer, but you should talk to your lawyer about making you an LLC. And you should talk about your project overview. Max 5 bullet points, 2 lines per bullet point, 36-point font. In this slide, the information you want to put out there is a very brief synopsis. You want to put out the genre, the budget, the stage of development, and any marketable attachments. That's it. That's all you have space for. Why does this project need to be made? In a tech deck, this would be a problem slide. What problem? What is the great problem that you're seeking to solve? Why does this film need to be made right now? There are tons of films being made, and most of them don't really solve a problem other than boredom. So you need to convince an investor that this project or this general story must be told, and it must be told right now. And then you must convince them that your project, and only your project, is the one that needs to tell the story. There is no other project that can tell this story anywhere near as well as yours, and that's what you need to convince any investor reading your deck. Up next, we have the opportunity. You can talk a bit about the potential market here. You can also talk about, you can draw from your audience analysis on this. And you more want to lay out the total potential gain. It's similar to the problem solution dynamic of slides 2 and 3. Slide 4 lays out the opportunity. Slide 5 focuses on why your film is the only one that can tell that story well. Slide 6 shows how you'll use your unique competitive advantage to market your film and do it better than anyone else could. This entire document is extremely persuasive. It needs to be, because all of these investors have lots of other places they could put their money. Slide 7 is distribution strategy. For those of you who don't know, distribution is making your product available for sale. Marketing is convincing people to buy it. You do need both. Slide 8 is the competitive analysis. Visually, this slide should just be a bunch of posters from films similar to yours. Unlike the lookbook, this should be films from the last 5 to 7 years so that they more accurately represent the current marketplace for films similar to yours. If you did a comparative analysis, you should have found 20 of these. You don't really need to have 20 on this slide. 5 is about right. You don't want to overwhelm, and you actually want this slide to be fairly striking. Slide 9 is the financials, and this is the one place where it's okay to break the rule of density. You should also have a lot of charts and graphs. You want to do a very top-level overview of this budget, of your budget there, excuse me. You also want to do up next is slide 9, the financial slide. Up next is slide 9, the financial slide. And this slide is about the only place you can really ignore the 5 bullet points guideline. But you should still do it in a very visual way. You'll want to talk a bit about where all the money's coming from. You want to talk a bit about your revenue projections. You want to talk a bit about your total budget and where all the money's going. That gets pretty dense, especially if you're using a lot of charts and graphs, which you should be doing. Sorry if you heard anyone run around. The Gorilla Rep Media best boy, my dog, is running to the backyard. I'm going to see if I can get through the slide, though. Current status. Just talk about what's going on in any traction you've had recently. Finally, your team. You should talk about your core team and focus on the members that investors will find marketable. Sadly, while the director of photography is hugely important to the overall quality of the film, most investors don't quite understand that, so you shouldn't put them on there. Nor should you put on your, unless they're just way too experienced to be on your budget level and the rest of your crew just pales in comparison. Then you might want to consider it. You also probably don't need to mention your composer. Sorry, it's true. You do want to mention your producers, your director, and this is a great place to talk about any recognizable name talent you already have on board as well. Or your casting director, if they've done a lot, should also be on there. And the final slide is a summary and a thank you. The summary, if there are only, the summary should assume that you have only 3 things that your investor is going to remember about your project. Those 3 things need to carry you to getting the next meeting, if not closing the deal. Those 3 things are what are on the summary, as well as a big thank you, just because it does tend to help. Just to help you all remember this, I do have a free template of this for both Keynote and PowerPoint in the resources section of my site. There's a link to that in the description.